Hey friend, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I'm going to show you how to mix a stereo drum loop. Today we're going to be exploring a drum loop or mixing a drum loop to fit inside of a track here. We're going to be using the frequency split trick to get a better control over our low end as well as our top end here on this drum loop. But before we dive in here to the mix, if you want to go a little bit deeper into the mixing process in its entirety and really start to hone your workflow as an audio engineer, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and it's just a simple PDF that will walk you through the entire mixing process, step by step, to help you get professional and radio-ready mixes without any more of the hassle and without any more of the guesswork. It is a completely free guide, and you can download it below using the link in the video description. Now let's jump in here and take a look at this drum loop. Let me start by showing you the drum loop in its original form. So here's just the drum loop by itself. So that's our raw, unprocessed, or raw in this form of the session. It's obviously been processed before it's come to get mixed. A lot of times when you get drum loops, they're going to have some pre-process on them, some reverb, some EQ, some compression, what have you. What we're doing here is we're splitting this up into 2 different tracks to get better control over this loop. So what I've done is I've created a duplicate of this drum loop. So I've called one drums low and the other one drums high. And what we're doing on the first EQ on each of them is getting control and isolating individual frequencies. So for our drums low track, I'm using everything below 356. And then over on our drums high, we're doing the opposite. We're taking everything above 356 here. So we're splitting the frequency range of this drum kit into 2 separate tracks. So this is going to give me one track that's just our bottom end, so we can compress it, we can EQ it, what have you, get it setting where we want it, and then we can bring the top end up to match the bottom end. That way we're not just trying to use EQ to balance. We can do our compression, we can do anything we need on these individual frequency ranges. So looking at just our bottom end here to start with, on this first EQ, separating our frequency range, and I'm doing a little cut at 180. It was a little muddy there. I'm just pulling out some of that so it's not so heavy. So take a listen without the EQ, and then I'll kick it in. You can hear just the bottom end on this loop. So essentially what this is giving us here now is just the kick drum and a little bit of the bottom end of the snare as well. And that's cool because then we can add some more weight to the snare as we balance the drums low and drums high track, down the line here. But what we can do now that we have just the kick drum is we can compress it and tighten it up a little bit and maybe add some attack as well. So I'm pulling in just the stock compressor here inside of Studio One, 30 millisecond attack, 120 millisecond release, 3-to-1 ratio here, and I'm pulling the threshold down till we're starting to emphasize that front end transient, that front end attack on our kick drum. By leaving the attack slower around 30 milliseconds here, we leave enough room on the front end that initial transient can pop through before our compressor starts working on the kick drum here. And then our release, we're parking in time that we pull off just some of the back end, some of the sustain of the kick drum to tighten it up here. So take a listen without our compressor and then with it, and you can see how much gain reduction we're doing as well. So once we've isolated our bottom end, now we're compressing it, and you can hear we're just reining in the sustain a little bit on our kick drum. So instead of We don't have that long extra back end. It's a little bit tighter and more focused sound. Now we can balance this with our top end here, but we're going to take it one step further as well here, and I'm going to boost the bottom end now. So now that we've controlled it or isolated our bottom end and controlled it, maybe added some attack as well here, now we can boost it to set it where we want it inside the mix here. So take a listen. We're at 80 hertz, just pulling up some of the fundamental here, just a dB and a half. So here's without that boost, and then I'll kick it in. Now we have some nice low punch coming from this drum loop. So take a listen, no processing, and then I'll kick in our low end processing here. We are getting a ton more punch and a ton more energy out of our bottom end here. So let's flip to the other side now. Here's our drums high. We're doing the opposite processing here on the top end. So using a high pass filter, and rolling off everything below 356. So our drums low is everything below 356, and our drums high is everything above 356. And I've got a couple boosts in here to bring up some of the hi-hat noise and to also bring up some extra attack and energy on drinking too much water here, starting to burp. Trying to bring up some extra energy out of the snare drum or the clap sound that we have going on here. So take a listen without the EQ, and then I'll kick it in. You can hear how we isolate the top end and emphasize some attack, some extra crack on our snare sound here. So we get rid of all the bottom end here so we don't hear our kick drum. We're doing that in our other one, and we don't have any phase issues between the processing on our low end and our top end here. This move here at 3K, that's what's bringing up the emphasis, that energy boost on the clap, gives it some more crack, so it's going to cut through inside the track. And then this move up here is bringing up some of the air on our hi-hat and our cymbal noises, so they feel crisper and they feel more alive. They're not so dull or dark sounding. That kind of makes you feel like it is a drum loop when everything's a bit darker. Now the final touch here on our drums high is just a touch of limiting here, and this is going to rein in the snare drum or the clap sound so we can level it and balance it with our kick drum in the drums low. So take a listen here. I'll bypass this and then I'll kick our limiter in. It's just 2 dB limiting, and it's not affecting the tone of our drums high track too much here. Reins in the transient a little bit on our clap, but it parks our drums high in one place. Now we can balance our drums low and drums high and get a level between our kick drum and our clap sound here. So let's put them both together now, and you can hear how they sit together. We'll start with no processing on them, and then I'll kick it in. And I want you to pay attention to how these two suddenly balance together. And we'll start with just the loop by itself. You can hear by isolating the bottom end frequencies and isolating the top end frequencies, we get better control over the different parts of this drum loop. So the clap sound, the hi-hat sound, the cymbal sounds, as well as the kick drum sound, we can compress it, tighten it up, and then balance these different elements of this one drum loop together to sit in the mix. I hope that was helpful for you. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're ready to take your mixes to the next level and really start dialing in your workflow as an audio engineer, then I have just the tool for you, and it is completely free. It is my 7-step mixing checklist, and you can download it below to start creating more professional mixes in less time. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.